Origins: from Louisiana to South Central Stanley. Tookie Williams III was born on December 29, 1953 in Louisiana, often given as Shreveport or New Orleans in different sources. In 1959-60, his mother moved with him to South Central Los Angeles, hoping for better opportunities, but landing in a neighborhood defined by racism, poverty, and street violence. Williams later described his first days there. He got into a fight almost immediately, and that moment convinced him that, in this environment, being tougher and more feared was the only protection he had. As a teenager, he developed a reputation as a street fighter and weightlifter, hanging around pool halls, parks, and corners. By his mid-teens, he was already somebody people in the neighborhood knew not to test. Before Crips. Baby avenues, baby cribs, avenue cribs. In the late 1960s, Raymond Washington and his friends formed a small neighborhood crew in East South Central Los Angeles. Before the word Crips ever existed, early versions of the group were called things like the Baby Avenues or Baby Cribs, Avenue Cribs, offshoots and imitators of older gangs like the Avenues. The idea was partly self-defense and partly power. A younger generation that wanted protection from older, more established gangs, but also wanted their own fear and respect on the streets. By around 1971, Washington linked up with Stanley Tookie Williams, who at that time was a feared Westside street fighter. They reportedly bonded over weightlifting and their shared interest in building something bigger than the small cliques that dominated LA gang life. From this alliance, the Crips as we know them took shape. Tookie's set, the Westside Crips. When the Crips began to organize more formally, there were essentially three major sets: Eastside Crips, Raymond Washington, later East Coast Crips; Westside Crips, Stanley Tookie Williams; Compton Crips, led by Mac Thomas. Williams built the Westside Crips on his reputation. He had already befriended small clique leaders and street toughs across West LA and South LA, and he used that influence to roll them into his new set. Early Westside Crips he and other chroniclers have associated with that period include names like Donald Sweetback, Archie James, Cuz Cunningham, Thomas Ellis, Melvin Hardy, Erskine, Mad Dog, Jones, Thomas, T-Bone, Ligon, Curtis, Buddha, Moro Ricardo, Bub, Sims. In contemporary accounts, Williams and his close friend Curtis Buddha Morrow were remembered as key enforcers and early exemplars of the Crip style: gunplay, intimidation, and physical dominance. The blue color eventually associated with the Crips is often traced in part to Morrow, either through his personal style or via Washington High School's colors, depending on the source. The Hollywood Palladium murder, Robert Ballou Jr. One early incident that became legendary in gang history was the murder of 16-year-old Robert Brooks Ballou Jr. outside the Hollywood Palladium in March 1972. Ballou was stomped and beaten to death after a concert. The confrontation reportedly started over a leather jacket, and the killing became known as the Hollywood Leather Jacket Murder. Members of the Westside Crips were arrested and later convicted in connection with this killing, including names like James Cuz Cunningham and Ricardo Bub Sims. While Williams himself was not convicted in that murder, many historians and reporters identify the Ballou case as a turning point. It helped ignite the long Crips Bloods War, in which numerous non-Crip gangs banded together into the Bloods Alliance to fight the rising Crip presence. From that moment on, the Crips were no longer just a new gang. They were the central players in what would become one of the deadliest gang conflicts in U.S. history. The public image, bodybuilder, and gong show appearance. By the mid-1970s, Williams was more than a neighborhood name. He was physically massive, heavily muscled, and took bodybuilding seriously. This physique, and his charisma, earned him a brief flash of mainstream TV exposure. In 1979, he appeared on NBC's The Gong Show as a bodybuilder, flexing on stage amid dancers. That appearance came shortly before his arrest for robbery and murder. It's one of the stranger, almost surreal, footnotes in his life. The co-founder of the Crips, at the height of LA gang violence, briefly appearing on a goofy national talent show. Spiral into PCP, robberies, and the 1979 murders. By the late 1970s, Williams' personal life was unraveling. According to court records and later summaries, he lost a counseling job at a group home after being linked to a robbery committed by youths under his supervision, fell deep into PCP use and other drugs, supported his habit increasingly through robbery and intimidation, including robbing drug dealers. Between February 28 and March 7, 1979, prosecutors say Williams committed a robbery spree that left 4 people dead. Albert Owens, a 26-year-old store clerk, shot and killed during a robbery of a 7-Eleven in Whittier, California. 2-4. Yena Yang, Saisha Yang, and their daughter Yi Chen Lin, killed at a family-owned motel in Los Angeles during another robbery. The state's case relied heavily on the testimony of accomplices and witnesses who said Williams personally pulled the trigger. Williams insisted until his death that he was innocent of these murders, claiming the witnesses were incentivized with deals and that he was framed. In 1981, he was convicted of 4 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances for robbery and use of a firearm, and sentenced to death. Early death row years, violence leadership and the Lil Fee stabbing. Williams arrived at San Quentin as inmate C29300 and quickly became known as a disciplinary problem. He was involved in multiple fights and assaults. He was cited for ordering the stabbing of another inmate in September 1988, according to prison records summarized in Clemency documents. On October 10, 1988, Williams himself was stabbed in the neck and seriously injured by Tequan Andre Lil Fee Cox, a notorious Roland 60s Crip and death row prisoner convicted of a separate 4-person family massacre. Prison officials later concluded that Cox's attack on Williams was retaliation for a previous stabbing of another inmate that Williams had allegedly ordered just weeks earlier, part of an internal Crip power struggle on death row. After that stabbing, Williams spent years in solitary confinement. Administrative segregation. By 2004, a classification report noted he had no serious violations since the late 1980s, marking a shift in his in-prison behavior. That 1988 incident with Lil Fee is the prison altercation many people are referring to when they talk about Tookie's conflict with a younger Crip killer on death row. Transformation. Books, anti-gang work, and Nobel nominations. Over time, isolation and age changed Williams. In the 1990s, he began to pivot from gang leadership to self-education and anti-gang activism. He co-authored a series of children's books. Tookie Speaks Out Against Gang Violence, aimed at warning kids away from gangs and drugs. He wrote Life in Prison, explaining the reality of incarceration to young readers. He later published his memoir, Blue Rage, Black Redemption, chronicling his journey from Crip leader to prison reform advocate. Teachers, community workers, and youth programs around the world began using his books as anti-gang curriculum. NGOs and supporters submitted his name multiple times for the Nobel Peace Prize and Nobel Prize in Literature, citing his writing and outreach from death row. Importantly, even as he denounced gang life, he never admitted to the 4 murders he was convicted of. Supporters argued this was because he was innocent. Critics argued this refusal to accept guilt undermined his claims of full redemption. Clemency, fight, and execution. As his final execution date approached in 2005, an international movement formed around his case. Celebrities, Snoop Dogg, Jamie Foxx, clergy, activists, and European officials called for clemency. Supporters pointed to his anti-gang work, his changed behavior since the late 80s, and alleged problems with the original trial evidence. Prosecutors, some victims' family members, and the California Attorney General's office argued the evidence had been repeatedly upheld and that his later writings did not erase his role in 4 murders. California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger ultimately denied clemency. On December 13, 2005, Stanley Tookie Williams was executed by lethal injection at San Quentin State Prison. His final messages emphasized peace, responsibility, and staying away from gangs. Rest in peace.